Hello YouTube, Audrina Mystique here to do BJD Addicts Prompt 35 Recasts. My views on this are formed slightly from a consumer's point of view and largely from an anthropologist's point of view, so my opinions are slightly different from the others that I've seen doing this prompt. The first question they posed was, well, actually I'm doing the questions out of order, but one of them they asked was, have you ever purchased one? Would you ever purchase one? If you purchased one by accident, what would you do with it? I've never purchased a recast doll. I have purchased a counterfeit good by accident once. It was some DVDs. And I sent them back and reported the person to eBay. And more recently, I got what I think might be a counterfeit sword from Lord of the Rings. I don't actually know for sure if it's a recast or a counterfeit. I'm probably not going to turn it back because, first of all, I can't. It was a vendor at one of a Renaissance fair, so I don't actually know their name or what company they came from. That's also why I don't actually know if it's a counterfeit or not. And let's see. Are they okay? Like, are recasts okay to make / buy? This is where my views as an anthropologist comes in, really. I mean, on the one hand, I can understand the genuine frustration of artists that are seeing their hard work copied by people who aren't willing to put in the time and effort to sculpt something original. And this, something similar actually happened to a friend of mine, except it was an academic paper, not a doll. Someone stole her paper, but she had already turned it in online, so she was able to prove that she had written it. But some people that happens to have to rewrite their paper, and I think it probably kind of feels the same for doll artists. But the fact that we are trying to use recast dolls as a measure of moral development, I think, is indicative of a wider problem. That problem being we are trying to use an economic system as a measure of social justice. I don't really agree with that. Especially since that particular economic system is capitalism. I mean, if you think about how capitalism actually works, you make a product as cheaply as you possibly can, and you sell it at a profit. If you assume that the raw materials are going to be fairly constant in the price, then the thing that you're underpaying is the labor needed to produce the product. So, it requires someone to be taken advantage of in order for it to work, even on paper. So I don't think it's really a good measure of moral value. And as far as the frustration of the artists go, as much sympathy as I have for them, I think they've largely created their own problem. So I don't really feel sorry for all the money they've lost. I mean, you have a company like Vogue's that sells their dolls for like $600 or $700 each. The Super Dolphy size. Even their mini Super Dolphy size sells for $400. And then you have, some of the smaller companies run by individual people. And like this girl, for instance, she was like $550, more expensive than a Volks doll. And she was from, one of the smaller companies, an American company, that's run by a single person. And you have these companies that sell dolls so expensive on the one hand, and they all have recasting problems. Then you see legitimate companies like Bobobi and Miro Doll and Fantasy Doll and Magical Angel, and all of their dolls are less than $300, and they don't have recasting problems. And they sculpt their own dolls. So I think that a large part of the recast problem would be solved if these companies lowered the price of their dolls. The more expensive companies, that is. And yeah, some people would say that then they wouldn't make as much money, it would cut into their profit margin and they'd go out of business. I don't think that's really a legitimate argument, because the smaller companies that are cheaper stay in business, and what they lose for each doll I think they could make up for in bulk, because more people would be buying from the legitimate company instead of from the recast company. So, while, yes, recasts are annoying and they can be heartbreaking for the artist, I think the companies largely are creating their own problems in how much they sell the dolls for. And I think they could solve their own problems by lowering the price of their dolls. Just as a general summary. And if I had a friend that had bought one, would I still be friends? Again, that goes back to using an economic system as a measure of moral worth, which doesn't work, I don't think. I think you get more problems than you solve that way, if you're trying to do that. I mean, just look at the state of poverty in the United States. Look at the Great Depression. That was done with this kind of mentality. Those that are on the bottom deserve to be on the bottom because they haven't done something right. When, in fact, they've tried. They really have tried. And they just don't have enough resources to get out of the hole they find themselves in. And if someone tries to enjoy a hobby like this in a cheap of a way as possible, I'm not going to hold it against them. In some ways, it's a lot more practical. So that pretty much sums up my views on everything. Thank you for